Hey friends, let me tell you a story. A man once kept an extra chair at his dining table. Every night he'd wait, hoping his children, his friends, someone would visit. Years passed. The chair stayed empty. One day he stopped waiting. He sat in that chair himself, poured a cup of tea, and smiled. Because he finally realized peace begins the day you stop waiting for others to fill your life. Today, I want to share 7 powerful truths that every person must understand. Especially as you grow older, the first key point is to stop apologizing for choosing yourself. For most of our lives, we are conditioned to believe that goodness means sacrifice, that love means giving endlessly, even when it empties us. From childhood, we learn to please, to accommodate, to adjust. We say yes because we fear being misunderstood if we say no. But as time passes, we realize that saying yes to everything is not kindness, it's exhaustion disguised as virtue. The truth is, there comes a stage in life when your peace matters more than your popularity, your stillness more than your approval, and your truth more than your reputation. Choosing yourself isn't betrayal, it's reclaiming the life you silently surrendered to others' expectations. You don't have to apologize for protecting your peace. You don't have to feel guilty for no longer showing up where you are constantly misunderstood. The people who truly love you will understand when you step back to breathe. The ones who don't will call it selfishness, but their perception is not your responsibility anymore. Your responsibility now is your energy, your health, your calm mind. Because when your heart has been broken by too much giving, the only medicine that heals is boundaries. Not walls built from bitterness, but fences built from clarity, where you decide who gets access to your emotions, your time, your space. Many people grow old but never grow wise because they never stop feeling guilty for putting themselves first. They still chase validation from people who never learn to value them. They apologize for resting. They apologize for saying no. They apologize for doing what brings them peace. But peace doesn't require permission. It's your birthright. You've earned it through decades of endurance, through years of showing up even when no one thanked you. This stage of your life is not about being available to everyone. It's about finally being available to yourself. Think about it. How many times did you silence your own needs just to avoid disappointing someone else? How many moments did you spend pretending to be fine because you didn't want to seem ungrateful or weak? But pretending has an expiration date. The older you get, the heavier the mask becomes. There's freedom in finally saying, I'm done explaining my peace. You no longer owe the world your constant presence. You owe yourself your quiet moments of reflection, your slow mornings, your unbothered afternoons. You owe yourself time to heal from the years of pleasing everyone but yourself. The beauty of aging is that it exposes the truth. Not everyone deserves your kindness, your time, or your energy. Some people were lessons, not lifetimes. And it's okay to walk away from those lessons without resentment. You don't need closure when peace has already spoken. When you start choosing yourself, you'll notice how silent your life becomes. The noise fades, the chaos disappears, the phone rings less. But in that silence, something extraordinary happens. You start hearing your own voice again. The one you ignored for years. The one that always knew what you needed, but was drawn by the demands of others. Choosing yourself doesn't mean you love others less. It means you love yourself enough to stop losing pieces of your soul to please them. You can still care, still give, still serve, but now from a place of fullness, not depletion. The most selfless act you can perform in old age is to finally take care of the person you've neglected most yourself. Because when you stop apologizing for choosing yourself, you don't become selfish, you become whole. And only when you are whole can your presence, your words, and your love truly heal the world around you. The second key point is to detach from the role they trapped you in. For most of your life, people have known you by what you could do for them. You were the provider, the problem solver, the caretaker, the shoulder they cried on. You wore every title they handed you, not realizing that each one came with invisible chains. They needed you to stay reliable, predictable, available, always the one who held things together. But in the quiet corners of your soul, there's a voice whispering that you've been more of a role than a person. Detaching from that role is not abandonment, it's liberation. It's peeling away the layers of obligation that smothered your identity and rediscovering the self that existed before everyone started needing something from you. You spent decades trying to live up to who they believed you were. They called you strong, so you didn't allow yourself to break. They called you dependable, so you ignored your own fatigue. They called you selfless, so you forgot what you wanted. Slowly, your life became a stage performance, and every day, you played the same character, repeating the same lines, wearing the same expression, hiding the same pain. But the truth is, that version of you was built to survive, not to live. It's time to step off that stage. The applause was never real. It was just noise that kept you from hearing your own heart. When you detach from the roles that no longer serve you, people will resist. They'll say, "You've changed." They'll call you distant, ungrateful, even cold. That's because your freedom disrupts their comfort. They were used to your sacrifices. They liked the version of you that revolved around their needs. But you are not responsible for their disappointment. You are responsible for your awakening. The roles they gave you were never meant to last forever. They were chapters, not your whole story. Life was always meant to evolve, and so were you. Holding on to outdated identities only makes you a stranger to your own soul. It's a strange feeling, isn't it? To not know who you are without the responsibilities that defined you. For years, you measured your worth through service. How much you could give, how much you could endure, how much you could fix. But when the noise of duty fades, a sacred silence follows. In that silence, there's fear at first, because you've never met yourself without your roles. Yet, beneath that fear lies something even more powerful. The truth of who you've always been, the person behind the titles, the soul behind the service, the heart behind the helper. That's who you are meant to meet now. When you finally detach from the roles, you start noticing the small things that once made you feel alive. You begin to breathe differently, walk differently, even think differently. You realize that your worth was never in how much you did for others, but in how deeply you existed within yourself. The laughter you once silenced comes back. The dreams you postponed start whispering again. You feel lighter, not because life has gotten easier, but because you finally put down the weight that was never yours to carry. The titles serve their purpose, but they were never supposed to define your entire existence. Freedom, in this stage of life, isn't about running away from people. It's about returning to yourself. Detaching doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop living as a character in someone else's story. You start writing your own. You realize that the most sacred role you'll ever play is the one where you are completely authentic. No labels, no expectations, no pretending. Just you, raw and real. That's the person you were always meant to be before the world told you who you should become. The third key point is to value energy over time. When we are young, we believe time is everything. We count hours, days, and years as though living longer automatically means living better. But as age ripens your understanding, you begin to see the illusion. It's not the hours you have that shape your life. It's the energy you bring into those hours. You can live 80 years and still feel hollow if you've spent those decades drained by negativity, by people who take more than they give, by worries that never end. Energy is life itself. Without it, even 1,000 tomorrows mean nothing. Protecting your energy becomes the art of living with wisdom rather than simply existing with time. Every morning you wake up, you have a certain amount of emotional fuel, your focus, your patience, your calm, your enthusiasm. And yet, most people spend it recklessly. They pour it into pointless arguments, gossip, regrets, and the endless desire to fix what isn't theirs to fix. By the end of the day, they feel exhausted, not because they worked hard, but because they leaked energy in 100 little ways that didn't serve them. Aging teaches you this truth the hard way. Energy doesn't replenish as easily as it used to. What once felt effortless now demands intention. And that's why wisdom begins when you stop wasting your inner power on what doesn't nurture your soul. You start to see that energy is sacred currency. Every interaction, every thought, every emotion is either an investment or a withdrawal. When you were younger, you could afford to give your energy away carelessly. You thought you'd always have enough strength to rebuild. But now, you realize that every person who drains your spirit costs you a piece of your peace. Every time you replay old wounds or chase someone's approval, you're spending your life's most valuable resource. You can't buy back energy with money. You can't earn it through recognition. The only way to preserve it is to become deeply intentional about where it flows. Protecting your energy isn't about becoming distant. It's about becoming discerning. You learn to recognize which people recharge you and which ones deplete you. You learn to notice how your body feels after certain conversations, lighter or heavier, hopeful or hollow. You stop forcing connections that feel one-sided. Stop trying to explain yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You begin to understand that every time you engage in negativity, you're writing invisible debt on your spirit. And so, you choose silence over reaction, simplicity over chaos, peace over drama. It's not withdrawal, it's wisdom. When you start valuing energy, you no longer measure a good day by how much you achieved, but by how peacefully you lived. You learn to move slower, not because you're tired, but because you've discovered the strength in stillness. You find joy in fewer things. A walk in the morning light, a cup of tea without hurry, a conversation that nourishes your mind instead of cluttering it. The old urge to prove yourself fades away, replaced by a calm certainty that your energy is too precious to waste on the meaningless. You become protective of your spirit, not possessive, because you finally understand it's your most finite resource. And maybe the most beautiful part of this realization is how it changes the way you see people and time itself. You stop chasing company just to fill the hours, because not every presence deserves your vibration. You stop fearing solitude because you recognize it as the place where your energy recharges. You stop regretting the past because every ounce of energy spent on what's gone steals from the peace of what's here. When you start valuing energy over time, you don't just live longer, You live lighter, calmer, and truer. You become less busy but more alive, less reactive but more aware, less tired but infinitely more present. The fourth key point is to let silence heal what words never could. There comes a time in life when you realize that no matter how eloquently you speak, how sincerely you explain, or how patiently you try to make others understand you, some hearts are not ready to listen. You spend years thinking that peace is something you earn through reasoning, through endless conversations that always circle back to misunderstanding. But one day, the noise inside you becomes louder than the words outside you, and that's when you discover the truth. Silence doesn't mean defeat, it means evolution. It's the language of maturity, a quiet surrender that says, I no longer need to prove my peace. Silence is not about giving up, it's about finally realizing that some battles are better won by walking away than by speaking louder. In your younger years, you believed that communication could fix everything. You fought to be understood, to clear your name, to explain your heart. You thought that if you found the right words, people would finally see your truth. But age teaches you something humbling. Understanding doesn't come from speaking, it comes from awareness. And not everyone is willing to see things as they are. Most only listen to defend their own version of the story. That's why silence becomes your greatest ally. It keeps your dignity intact when anger tempts you to react. It holds your spirit steady when chaos demands attention. Silence teaches you to stop wasting your wisdom on ears that only hear noise. You start realizing that silence has its own sound, a sound of clarity. In silence, you hear your intuition more clearly. You notice how your mind calms when you stop feeding it with arguments, gossip, or endless justifications. You realize that peace doesn't require witnesses. It doesn't need validation or applause. It simply exists when you stop trying to control how others perceive you. There's a certain grace that comes when you stop explaining your worth. The world may call it indifference, but you'll know it as serenity. You stop talking not because you have nothing to say, but because you've learned that words often dilute what the soul already knows. The power of silence is not in withdrawal, it's in observation. When you stay silent, you start seeing people for who they are, not for who they pretend to be. You begin to notice the difference between those who genuinely care and those who only show up when it benefits them. You begin to see how noise distracts and silence reveals. You start reading energy more than language, intention more than expression, and that awareness becomes your strength. It's in those quiet spaces that you grow, not by collecting more opinions, but by shedding them. Silence becomes your filter, separating what deserves your voice from what deserves your absence. When you embrace silence, you also release the burden of convincing. You no longer chase closure from others because you find it within yourself. You stop replaying old conversations, trying to find the perfect line you should have said. You stop justifying your pain to people who were never meant to understand it. Instead, you sit with your emotions, you breathe through them, and in that stillness, something miraculous happens. Healing begins. The wounds that words kept reopening finally start to close. You realize that sometimes silence is not the lack of response, it's the loudest declaration of self-respect. Silence also teaches you timing. You understand that not every truth needs to be spoken right away. Some truths need patience. Some realizations need to settle quietly in your heart before they're ever shared. Silence gives you perspective. It allows your emotions to mature before they become reactions. You begin to see how stillness transforms anger into understanding, pain into wisdom, and loss into gratitude. The older you get, the more you'll find peace in saying less, not because you don't care, but because you finally do. You care about your mind, your spirit, your balance, and so you let silence do the talking, because silence, when chosen with awareness, speaks louder than any voice ever could. The fifth key point is to love without losing yourself. Love, in its purest form, is not supposed to drain you, it's supposed to expand you. But somewhere along the way, most people confuse love with sacrifice, devotion with disappearance. They believe that to love someone deeply, they must give up parts of themselves piece by piece until nothing remains but the reflection of the person they love. That's not love, that's emotional erosion. Real love doesn't require you to shrink. It invites you to grow alongside another person while still standing firmly in your own truth. Loving without losing yourself means keeping your essence intact, your individuality, your dreams, your inner peace, even as you care deeply for others. In your younger years, you may have believed that love meant pleasing others, doing everything to keep relationships intact, even when it cost your peace. You tolerated disrespect because you confused endurance with loyalty. You silenced your needs because you feared being seen as difficult. But age brings clarity. You begin to understand that love without self-respect isn't love at all. It's dependency wrapped in guilt. You cannot give endlessly from an empty heart. To love without losing yourself, you must first learn to love yourself with the same intensity you've poured into others. That doesn't mean you become distant or cold. It means you start recognizing that your well-being is sacred too. There's a quiet kind of power in learning to love and let go at the same time. You love fully, but you no longer cling. You give, but not to the point where it costs your peace. You show care, but you no longer chase validation. That shift changes everything. Because when you stop trying to earn love, the love you attract becomes purer. It's no longer about proving your worth. It's about sharing your light. People who truly value you will never require you to dim yourself to make them comfortable. They will not demand you to carry their emotional weight while ignoring your own. The older you get, the more you realize that balance is the truest form of love. The ability to hold someone's heart without dropping your own. When you learn to love without losing yourself, boundaries become an act of compassion, not rejection. You start saying no without guilt because you understand that protecting your energy allows you to love more sincerely. You no longer try to save people from their own storms. Instead, you offer them shelter without drowning alongside them. You become gentler but wiser, kinder but stronger. You realize that sometimes walking away from a connection that harms your spirit is the deepest form of love there is. Love for yourself and even love for the other person, because it prevents both from sinking into resentment. True love allows space. It breathes. It doesn't suffocate. Love, when it's real, doesn't erase your identity. It enhances it. You no longer measure love by how much pain you can endure for someone else, but by how safe and whole you feel in their presence. You stop romanticizing struggle. You stop mistaking chaos for passion. Instead, you seek calm connections where your soul feels understood, not drained. You begin to see love not as possession, but as partnership, not as control, but as coexistence. You can stand next to someone without losing the rhythm of your own heartbeat. You can care deeply while still honoring your boundaries. That's the maturity love was always meant to teach you. And when you reach that point, love becomes something entirely different. It becomes freedom. You love people not because you need them, but because you choose them from a place of wholeness. You appreciate their presence, but you are not afraid of their absence. You give without keeping score, and you receive without fear. Loving without losing yourself means realizing that you can be soft without being weak, open without being narvy, and loving without being lost. It's about staying rooted in who you are, even as your heart extends outward. Because the moment you forget yourself in love, the love itself begins to fade. But when you remain true to your essence, love grows deeper, steadier, and infinitely more real. The sixth key point is to make solitude your sanctuary, not your prison. There's a difference between being alone and being lonely, but most people never learn that distinction until later in life. In youth, solitude feels like punishment, an empty space filled with restless thoughts and fears of insignificance. But with time, you begin to see solitude for what it truly is, a sacred mirror reflecting who you are without the noise of the world. When you spend enough time in silence, you realize that the discomfort of being alone isn't caused by the absence of others. It's caused by the absence of connection with yourself. And once you learn to be at peace in your own company, solitude stops feeling like isolation and starts feeling like home. In solitude, you rediscover the parts of yourself that got buried under the demands of others. The person who used to dream, create, imagine, they're still inside you, waiting to be heard. When you remove the distractions of constant noise, conversations, and expectations, you start hearing your own thoughts clearly again. You begin to understand what truly brings you peace and what was only a temporary escape. You realize how often you mistook company for comfort, even when that company drained you. Solitude strips away pretense. It shows you who you are when no one is watching, when there is no applause, no judgment, no performance. That's where authenticity begins, in the quiet corners where your soul finally gets to breathe. For many, solitude feels uncomfortable at first because it demands honesty. When you're alone, you can't hide behind business or excuses. You face your regrets, your fears, your unspoken dreams. You sit with your own shadow and learn to make peace with it. It's in these moments of stillness that healing begins. The mind, which once chased validation and approval, learns to rest. The heart, which once clung to others for security, learns to find safety within itself. You stop running from your emotions and start understanding them. You learn that solitude isn't emptiness, it's awareness. And through that awareness, you reconnect with the power you forgot you had. Solitude also sharpens gratitude. When you spend time alone, the simplest things start to feel profound. The warmth of sunlight on your face, the sound of rain against the window, the stillness of early morning. You begin to see life not as something to rush through, but as something to savor. The moments that used to seem ordinary now feel sacred. You no longer need constant stimulation to feel alive. The quiet itself becomes fulfilling. In solitude, you learn to enjoy your own company, your thoughts, your memories, your peace. You start realizing that happiness was never hiding in others. It was waiting within you, buried under years of noise and distraction. The beauty of solitude is that it frees you from the need to be seen. You no longer crave attention or validation because your worth stops depending on external approval. You stop chasing people who never truly valued you. You stop explaining your choices to those who never tried to understand them. Instead, you become content in your own rhythm, reading, reflecting, walking, creating, simply existing without apology. You no longer seek constant company because you've built a life rich enough to enjoy on your own. You don't isolate yourself out of bitterness, you simply choose peace over performance. When you turn solitude into your sanctuary, you transform loneliness into strength. You realize that solitude is not a space of lack, but of abundance, a space where creativity is born, clarity deepens, and spirit renews. It's the soil where self-awareness grows, where your inner voice becomes louder than external noise. You no longer see being alone as something to escape, but as something to embrace. Because in solitude, you don't lose the world. You find yourself. You find the calm that no crowd can offer, the joy that no validation can replace, and the peace that no noise can disturb. The seventh key point is to redefine what living fully means. For most of life, people chase the wrong definitions of fulfillment. More possessions, more recognition, more validation. They believe living fully means doing more, earning more, being seen more. But as the years pass, that illusion begins to fade. You start realizing that the truest form of abundance isn't in how much you have, but in how little you need to feel content. Living fully isn't about filling your calendar, it's about freeing your soul. It's not about chasing every opportunity. It's about cherishing the few that truly matter. True living begins when you stop measuring life by the noise it makes and start valuing the peace it brings. In youth, the world teaches you that success is the ultimate proof of life well lived. So you run, you strive, you compete, constantly chasing moments that look impressive to others but feel empty within. You climb ladders that lead nowhere, collect things that lose meaning, and call it progress. But somewhere along the journey, the soul grows tired of pretending. You begin to sense that what you truly crave isn't more achievement, it's alignment. It's waking up without anxiety, working without resentment, sleeping without regret. Living fully, you realize, is not about adding more years to your life, but adding more life to your years. And life, real life, begins the moment you start listening to your own rhythm instead of the world's applause. When you redefine what living fully means, you start finding beauty in simplicity. The morning sun feels like a blessing again. Conversations with depth feel richer than crowds with noise. You stop rushing through moments just to check them off your list. You taste your food instead of inhaling it. You watch the rain instead of avoiding it. You start to live slower but deeper. The superficial loses its charm because meaning has taken its place. You realize that you don't need to impress anyone. You just need to feel connected to your own truth. Living fully becomes less about excitement and more about alignment, less about quantity and more about quality. This realization also changes how you see people. You no longer crave a large circle, you crave real connection. You'd rather share silence with someone who understands your soul than spend hours talking with people who only know your surface. You no longer chase validation because peace has become your compass. You stop trying to be everything for everyone and start being completely yourself for a few who truly see you. The older you get, the more sacred that authenticity becomes. You stop entertaining drama, stop explaining your joy, stop apologizing for your calm. Living fully starts to look like letting go of anything that disrupts your inner stillness. You also learn that living fully doesn't always mean being happy, it means being honest. You begin to accept that sadness, loneliness, and uncertainty are part of the experience too. You stop avoiding pain and start learning from it. You realize that every emotion, even the uncomfortable ones, adds depth to your soul. Living fully is not about escaping reality, it's about embracing it without resistance. It's crying when your heart aches and laughing when your spirit lifts. without pretending to be okay when you're not. You stop striving for constant highs and start finding grace in the middle ground, in the quiet steadiness of being alive. And finally, when you redefine living fully, gratitude becomes your natural state. You stop looking for grand reasons to be thankful and start seeing the miracles in the mundane. A quiet morning, a familiar face, a moment of stillness after chaos. You no longer postpone joy for some future achievement because you understand that this moment, right here, is the life you once prayed for. Living fully isn't about reaching some final destination. It's about being present enough to appreciate the journey. It's about waking up each day knowing that peace, not perfection, is the real measure of a life well lived. And so, when you reach this stage of life, when the noise quiets, when the crowd fades, when the pace slows, you realize something profound. It was never about becoming someone in the eyes of the world. It was always about becoming whole in the eyes of your own soul. You spent years giving, fixing, proving, chasing, until life gently stripped it all away and whispered, "Now return to yourself." In old age, you no longer crave more time. You crave more meaning. You no longer want applause, you want peace. You no longer want to be everywhere. You want to be exactly where your spirit feels alive. This is the season of clarity, when you stop chasing people who were never meant to stay and start nurturing the relationship that will last until your final breath, the one you have with yourself. You begin to see that solitude is not loneliness, silence is not emptiness, and self-focus is not selfishness. It's wisdom. It's understanding that the world doesn't need a louder you. It needs a lighter you. A soul that is unburdened, untangled, unshaken. You stop trying to control how life unfolds and start finding grace in how beautifully it still blooms, even in its quiet moments. Because in the end, the richest life is not the one filled with endless achievements or endless company. It's the one where you can sit alone, look back, and smile knowing you lived true. You loved deeply, but you didn't lose yourself. You walked away from noise, but you never stopped caring. You found joy not in being everything for everyone, but in finally being completely yourself. And maybe that's what living truly means. Not the endless pursuit of more, but the gentle acceptance of enough. Not chasing the next chapter, but being grateful for the page you're on. When you reach that place, you've not just aged, you've awakened. And that awakening, that quiet peace within, is the greatest victory of all.